and non-binary youth from receiving puberty-blocking drugs could violate the Constitution. The department also challenging an Alabama law that bars doctors from dispensing such medications to children. This is SRN News. SRN News. Federal water officials say they'll keep hundreds of billions of gallons of Colorado River water inside Lake Powell instead of letting it flow downstream to southwestern states and Mexico.
U.S. Assistant Secretary of Water and Science Tanya Trujillo says the move will allow the Glen Canyon Dam to continue producing hydropower while officials strategize about how to operate the dam with a lower water elevation. The decision won't have any immediate impacts on the amount of water allocated for the region's cities and its farm, but it reflects the compounding challenges facing the region, where roughly 40 million people and a $5 billion a year agricultural industry rely on the Colorado River. Jeremy House reporting.
Another rough session for investors on Friday on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 98 points. The high-tech NASDAQ down by 173. You'll find more on these stories at srnnews.com.
The following program is sponsored by the law offices of Patrick L. Smith. This is the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. Get ready with your legal questions and call Patrick now. 877-943-9673. Again, that's 877-943-9673. The law office is open. And now your host, Patrick Smith.
Oh, hi there, and welcome to another edition of the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith. Today is Saturday, May 7th, 2022, and boy, do we have a show for you. So today's show, you can call in with your legal questions, 877-943-9673. I'm local Central Florida Attorney Patrick Smith, and we're here every Saturday morning to educate and answer your legal questions. 877-943-9673, or you can email me, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. I do get all the email questions, and I do respond to each and every one of them. You can email me directly, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. Email during the show, and we, of course, try to answer your email questions live on the air, but we love to hear from you. So we always encourage you to call in and be part of the program, 877-943-9673. Again, that toll-free number, open phone lines to call in with your legal questions, get the legal help you need this morning, 877-943-9673. So I want to begin this morning's monologue with a little bit of a disclaimer and a warning, kind of an advisory warning. And you watch certain television programs, they start sometimes with these parental advisories. We're going to have our own special parental advisory here this morning. For those of you who listen with the family and have little ears listening, little ears that haven't been exposed to certain topics of adult conversation, you may want to change your dial at this moment because of the nature of today's subject matter that we're going to be discussing. And I will tip my cap a little bit and have you know that it has to do with a recent leaked Supreme Court decision that occurred on Tuesday, May 2nd. So out there, if you're listening and you have little ears listening, it may not be the best episode for them to hear, so you may want to take this time just to turn the channel to some fun music for the kiddos while we continue this discussion. So that disclaimer and warning being out of the way. On Tuesday, we did have a very interesting first time ever leak of a Supreme Court case. And it's fascinating for lots of reasons. That whole leak is a story in and of itself. And maybe we can do a show on that. But today we're going to talk and use this opportunity of the leaked opinion, which is not law, by the way. A lot of people are citing it as if it's already law. It's a draft opinion. It is not in any way binding. It's not in any way the law of the land at this point. It's just a glimpse at what could be the law of the land at this point. Our goal today is not to have a pro-choice versus pro-life debate. That is not what we're trying to do. So the calls, if you're going to call in, it's not about your opinion on whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. What we want to do is have a discussion on the constitutionality of certain rights. and the origin for those rights. So I'm going to lay out the framework for these sorts of decisions regarding any rights, whether it's a right to privacy, the right to an abortion, or whatever that right may be. When the Supreme Court takes a look at this, they basically have two paths. And the paths are, we're going to find a right in the first 8 amendments that's specifically enumerated in the Constitution. That's obviously the clearest path. Those first 8 rights are, in the First Amendment, the right to religious liberty, the right to freedom of speech, press, assembly, to petition. Second Amendment rights are the right to keep and bear arms. Third Amendment is that there's no requirement that you quarter soldiers. There's a Fifth Amendment right for due process. And in addition to that, there's a Fourth Amendment right. We skipped Fourth Amendment right from undue search and seizure. There's a Sixth Amendment right to a speedy and public trial. Seventh Amendment right to a trial by jury for civil cases. And a Eighth Amendment right that says you're free from excessive bond or cruel and unusual punishment. So those are the specifically enumerated rights. And then they go on to say that under the term ordered liberty, in other words, there are certain things in our history and tradition that are so important to us that it's part of our ordered liberty. So that even though not specifically enumerated in the Constitution, we find that these rights do exist under ordered liberty. Example, the right to marry, the right to obtain contraception, the right to reside with relatives, the right in certain circumstances to undergo involuntary surgery. To not undergo involuntary surgery, rather. So there are certain rights the court throughout case history has said these rights exist even though they are not specifically enumerated in the Constitution. So the court says in this draft regarding the right to privacy, instead of seriously pressing that argument that the abortion right itself has deep roots, supporters of Roe and Casey, we'll talk a little bit more about Casey here in a moment, contend that the abortion right is an integral part of the broader entrenched right. Roe termed that a right to privacy, and Casey described it as a freedom to make intimate and personal choices that are central to personal dignity and autonomy. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, meaning of the universe and of the mystery of human life. So the question before us is, within the U.S. Constitution, is there a right to privacy? All right. So if you have a thought on that, 877-943-9673. 877-943-9673. Give us a call now with your thoughts. Let's go to our first caller of the day. Let's go to Bill in Newport Richey. Bill, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Good morning, Patrick. My question doesn't involve anything you've been talking about, but
Well, that's okay, Bill. We'll field all questions.
it has to do with I owned a fire truck. I sold it to a gentleman in Northport. He made arrangements with a company in Zephyr Hills to tow the truck to his location. And during that time frame, they worked out a deal where he didn't want the truck anymore. He just wanted the transmission. The gentleman in Zephyr Hills came and got the truck, took it to his location, and now he's decided he's going to keep the truck and not take the transmission to the gentleman that paid for it. And just wondering, do we have any legal recourse against this tow company?
What's the total value of the truck if you had to put a market value on it, Bill?
I sold the truck for $1,000 to the gentleman in Northport, and then he paid the tow company, I think it was $700 and some few dollars to tow it down to his location. And he never did because they worked out a second agreement where the guy didn't want the whole truck. He just wanted the transmission. They wanted the truck, so they worked out a financial arrangement. And I don't know all those details. I just know that the guy is not communicating with either the man in Northport or me. He just won't answer our calls.
And all this occurred in Newport Richey and Pasco County?
Well, that's where I had the truck. Yes, he picked
Okay.
up the truck at my location.
Yeah, I think
Took it-
it sounds like a small claims matter to me, Bill. I think it
Mhm.
may be worth a consultation with a good civil litigation attorney. If you want to take us up on that, we'll be happy to give you that referral to one who can consult with you. But it definitely sounds like a small claims case to me. And it sounds like one that it's such a small matter, and it was probably all done on a handshake, I'm guessing, correct?
Well, I never even talked to the man, never even saw him, don't even know him.
Okay, so
The
even
guy that bought it.
even less than a handshake in that situation. So at the end of the day, it's a good example of the value of having a contract or a written agreement, at least, because it's going to lay out terms, conditions, and gives you the ability to say, hey, if you do something different than what we've agreed upon, here's my remedy. Now, is it worth doing all that over the sale of $1,000 truck? I don't know. It's a question of how much do you want to invest in your protection. But at the end of the day, I think your ultimate remedy now, given the way the cards you've been dealt, is to bring a case in small claims court. Before you do that, as part of your case that you're building for that potential small claims case, you may want to send him a couple of demand letters saying, here's my position, here's my version of the facts. If you have a different version of the facts and you want to discuss, let me know. I want to resolve this amicably if we can. And then, and only then, if you don't amicably resolve it, you bring that small claims case. I think that makes you look better to the judge, where you show the judge, hey, Your Honor, we tried not to take your time up with this. And only after we didn't get a response or we didn't get a reasonable response did we bother having to take this court's valuable time to get a remedy.
Okay, I'll pass that on to the guy in Northport because he's the one that's going to have to do the small claims.
Yeah,
he's out the money to me, and he's out the money to the tow guy.
That's what it sounds like. So, and Bill, while I got you, let me ask you this: do you think there's a right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution?
All right, to privacy.
Yes, sir.
My first thought would be yes, but I guess if you crack that nut open, and I mean,
well,
how far?
let's be
It's
clear.
a big question.
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. It's not an easy question to answer, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make: is that these 9 justices, and the reason we're called to pray for our leaders. This is an example. They're faced with and tasked with some of the most difficult decisions that need to be made. So it's not a very easy process it's easy to criticize a decision once it has been made. And I'm sure there will be critics, whichever way the ultimate decision comes down. But the point I'm making is, and I appreciate you demonstrating it, Bill, is it's not an easy call. It's not an easy decision to make when you look at a document that's hundreds of years old and you say, was this thought about at that time? And a point that was made to me during this week in conversation with my wife was her point when she asked, how many women rather were involved in the drafting of the Constitution. And I thought about it. I had never thought about it. And that's because I'm a man. I just never even gave any thought to the fact that there weren't any women involved in the crafting of the Constitution. And, then the question becomes, had women been involved in that crafting process, Bill, do you think the document would have looked a little different?
It probably would have.
Yeah, I think it definitely would have. I mean, it certainly.
Although the time frame that we're talking about, the women didn't have a whole lot of say so, or the say so was not looked upon as very important.
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that, the U.S. and our history, we've gotten some things wrong, and that's the beauty of our democracy. We have the ability to correct it. And I think that's the amazing thing here is if we make a mistake, we can correct it. Women were the right to vote in women's suffrage in 1920. I mean, that was 102 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. It's scary to think about how recent that was. And so you're right. It was a different time, and it's a different time now. And the Constitution has the ability to be amended for those changes in time. And I think that's the beauty of the design, is the ability to accommodate for those changes. But Bill, I appreciate your insight, and thanks for calling in with your question.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the air.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you. Alrighty, 877-943-9673. 877-943-9673. You can call in now, live and local. We're happy to help any way we can. You can call in with any legal question at all. We're happy to field any and all legal questions this morning, but we are specifically discussing the leaked U.S. Supreme Court decision that, of course, is not law, but it is in process, apparently, to become a Supreme Court decision that is going to lay a foundation for future decisions. And it is going to be fascinating to see what the final decision comes out to be. So we're discussing the potential reversal of Roe versus Wade and the basis for that. And the ultimate crux of our conversation is there a right to privacy under the United States Constitution? So if you have a thought on that, you're welcome to share that with us today. If you have a legal question, you're, of course, welcome to call in 877-943-9673, 877-943-9673. Open phone lines. You can email your question to patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. In analyzing the right to privacy, there's basically two potential paths for that. There is an analysis under what we call the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, and there is also an analysis under the Due Process Clause. It's two completely different analyses. As we go on throughout the show, I'll kind of walk you through those two different analyses. But just know that's the ultimate framework of these sorts of decisions when they get presented to the Supreme Court of the United States. Is this a matter protected under the Equal Protection Clause of the United States 14th Amendment, or is it a matter of due process? And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And ultimately, what you're going to find is that this debate about the actual topic of abortion, the critical question before the court is, should this be decided by 9 justices or by each state's legislature? Where should that political process occur, within the Supreme Court or at the state level? And that's one of the criticisms you see in this draft opinion of the Roe Court, was that there was a political process in the works in the states making its way through, where the topic of abortion was being debated and legislated and drafted and sent to committee, and it was making its way through the various legislatures. And that process is slow, and sometimes it's slow to our benefit. It allows people to adjust and compromise. And this draft opinion critiques that 73 court by saying you ripped that political process away from the people when you decided Roe versus Wade and abruptly made this new law. And then they go on to make further critiques. But the question is, where should that political process occur? So we're not saying whether pro-lifers are right or pro-choicers are right. The question is, where is the right place to have that debate? 9 justices in the Supreme Court or at your state legislature? And I've run into people throughout the week who are saying, I'm a pro-choice advocate, but at the end of the day, I think this should be decided by the states. And I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. This can put pro-choicers and pro-lifers on the same side of the decision. They can both say the state should decide this as opposed to the Supreme Court. So it cuts across multiple political views, and it's not as lopsided as most people make it out to be. 877-943-9673. That's your live and local number. Be part of our show. 877-943-9673. Give us a call now on your thoughts, whether or not the U.S. Constitution has a right to privacy. And you're also welcome to call in with any and all of your other legal questions. 877-943-9673, or email me, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. All right, let's go to St. Pete. Let's talk to Dan. Dan, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Good morning, Patrick.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir. I was wondering, if someone leaves you, say, a plot of land in their will, do you have to take that gift?
So technically, it's not a gift, it's a devise. I just want to make that clear, because for tax purposes, that can have a big bearing. So as a devise to you, no, there's no requirement that you accept an inheritance. Now, I've had cases over the years where people say, I don't want to receive this inheritance. And the logic there, what do you think the logic was? When they said, hey, I don't want it, what do you think the number one reason people don't want to receive an inheritance is?
Passing on as a cost and expense they will have to absorb.
Cost and expense, exactly. So at the end of the day, they say, well, for instance, if it's a timeshare or something that's going to continue to cost them money, they say, yeah, we're good. I'm gonna disclaim this particular inheritance. The other reason we see is a little less popular, but also common, is you see a situation where the family member discovers that, well, hey, if I don't take this property, then it goes to person B, commonly their children or some other family member. So they will do what we call a conditional disclaimer. And the conditional disclaimer is where they say, I'm going to give up my right to inherit so long as the effect of my disclaimer is that this person or these people get it instead. Because if you disclaim, it treats you as having predeceased the decedent who devised you the property. And that is a great way for, a parent who says, I don't really need the money, but my grandchildren could take advantage of it. They've analyzed and discussed with their attorney, there's not going to be any generation skipping transfer tax implications, or none to the point where it's going to trigger a tax. And they say, I'm going to disclaim. So yes, you do have a procedure by which you can disclaim a property that is devised to you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, Dan. Dan, while we have you, I want to ask you, do you think there's a right to privacy in the United States Constitution?
Right to privacy. I don't really know, but I would say yes.
You would say yes. All right. And like I said, it's a tough question. The fact that you struggle with it's good. It shouldn't be one where it's abundantly clear. I think that's the point. It's a difficult decision. It's a close call. And I think it's one that, like I said earlier, causes us to need to pray for our Supreme Court justices every day. But Dan, we appreciate you calling in. All right,
Thank
Dan.
you.
Have a good day, Dan. All right, you're listening to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith, 877-943-9673, 877-943-9673. Give us a call now. Open phone lines, live and local. Happy to help any way that we can. And we are abundantly excited to be talking with you today about the leaked Supreme Court decision and sort of the framework for this debate. Not so much, like I said, the merits of pro-life versus pro-choice, but the question of where should this constitutional debate occur? 9 Supreme Court justices or your state legislature. And we were talking about the framework that goes into these analysis. And when they go to analyze the right to privacy, it's under equal protection clause or due process. So let's talk about equal protection. When it's examining equal protection, the question is it a specifically enumerated right under those amendments 1 through 8, or is it a right that is so ingrained our history and tradition it's part of ordered liberty? And we've already laid some of those out. So basically the draft of this opinion says no. The right to an abortion doesn't fit any of those categories. They go into great detail to kind of lay out the historical traditional aspect of the criminalization of abortion. And they say, so it can't be protected under a specific enumeration. And they further go on to expound as that's the basis why it's not an enumerated right or a right read into ordered liberty. Their basic position is, how can you say something is so ingrained in our ordered liberty and therefore a protected right when at the time the very amendment, the 14th Amendment, was ratified, 3/4 of the states made the right you claim is there illegal. And within months of the passage of the 14th Amendment, every state had made this particular right illegal. So they're not saying that abortion is right or wrong. They're just saying it can't be read as a fundamental right as part of our ordered liberty based on the fact that most and eventually all of the states had criminalized the act. That doesn't, again, that's not an argument on the outcome of pro-life versus pro-choice. It's a discussion of whether or not within the Constitution this right exists. So if you have an opinion on that, 877-943-9673, 877-943-9673. I'm your local Central Florida Attorney Patrick Smith. Give us a call now or shoot us an email, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. All right, let's go to Palmetto and let's talk to Mary. Mary, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Good morning.
Hey, Mary, how are you today?
I'm okay. And thank you for taking my call.
Happy to do it.
I've
Mary.
received a letter in the mail from an attorney in New York stating that I've inherited some money, and they're asking me to send them my Social Security number and my tax information. Now, it looks legitimate to me. I have called the attorney's office and I've spoke to a legal assistant, and it sounds legitimate, but I don't know if I should go ahead and do that.
It sounds to me like it is also legitimate, but if you want me to take a look at the paperwork with you free of charge, Mary, I'll be happy to look at that with you. It's really simple. And if need be, we can always fire off a letter to the party that sent you that correspondence. And if they are scam artists, that'll probably scare them away. And if it's legitimate, then it'll just verify the legitimacy of that particular inheritance.
Okay. So
Mhm.
then I need to call you back to set up an appointment.
Yeah.
Is that what we do? Or-
Yeah, I'll give you the office number here in a few moments. I'll give out the office line so that if you or anyone else listening wants to schedule a complimentary consultation, we'll be happy to set you up with that.
Okay. Well, there's no way I can write it down now.
Okay, that's
why
fine. You
I'm
can
asking.
always call the station. You can look us up on the internet. Our phone number is quite easy to find, okay?
Okay. Thanks so much. But it does sound like it's legitimate to you
Based
because
on
they
what,
also sent a
yeah, based on what I've
they
heard,
sent a
it sounds
copy
legitimate.
of the will. Yeah, they did send me a copy of the will.
Right. It sounds legitimate to me, but like I said, that's without seeing the actual paperwork. So if you want me to take a look at
Sure.
it, then I can verify for you. And there's some other things we can do to make sure it's legitimate, check the court records, things like that, and verify that it is in fact legitimate for you, Mary. And Mary, since you're the first female caller of the day, I want to ask you, is there a right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution?
Absolutely.
Okay. And let me ask you this too, because since you're our first female caller, I want to ask you the point that my wife made about how many women were involved in the drafting of the Constitution. Do you think the Constitution looks different if women are involved in the drafting of it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree with your wife 100%.
And you're not alone. That's an extremely popular opinion amongst women. And like I said, I just wanted someone to sort of vocalize that on behalf of women. So we really appreciate you calling in, Mary.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your help, sir. Have a blessed day.
You too, my dear. All righty. You're listening to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith. 877-943-9673. You can call in now, live and local. The topic of conversation today, is there a right to privacy in the United States Constitution? In between those, we are also taking your legal questions, 877-943-9673. Any legal question at all? Nope. Legal topic is off limits, 877-943-9673. You can email me, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. All right, let's go to St. Pete and let's talk to Craig. Craig, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great, Craig. How can we help?
I was just calling about a comment on your previous subject about constitutionality of privacy.
Fire away, Craig.
I would have to say by the overgeneralized reading of it that privacy from the government is absolutely guaranteed unless they have a law or some legal machination to get inside of your business, be that private or personal. The general don't invade someone's privacy without a search warrant kind of thing. But against private citizens, it's not guaranteed at all. There is no guarantee at all against private citizens being, newspapers doing their work. As far as women being involved in it, absolutely, they should be involved in the quote unquote, rewriting of the Constitution through the amendments.
And I think that's a fair point, and I appreciate your position, Craig. And Craig, I just want to ask, and it's only because of the way you expressed that so flawlessly. Are you a practicing attorney?
No.
Well, you
I'm
sound like one, so you're
just a busybody.
okay. Well, what you essentially described was the due process element. So we talked about that first prong before we took the last few callers and talked about equal protection. Well, under due process, the question is there a protected right? If there is a protected right, it's exactly what you said. The test that gets applied, because there's two tests for a law and whether or not it passes due process. The question is, if it covers a protected right, it has to pass a test known as strict scrutiny, or in law school, what we call the kiss of death, because very few laws make it past the strict scrutiny analysis. And that's where you have to have a compelling governmental interest that is, and the law is narrowly drafted to achieve just that compelling government interest. So that kills a lot of laws, obviously. The other one is where the court says, no, there's no fundamental right being addressed by this law. Then we apply rational basis. which is any legitimate interest will justify that law. And that's essentially what you're describing, that they basically do have the potential to invade if there's this compelling governmental interest that is narrowly drafted to achieve just that interest versus a situation where it's not a fundamental right and any legitimate interest would justify it. But Craig, I think it's a great point. What I hear you saying is, yes, there is a right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, and that's fundamental. That the ability for them to take it away has to be done previous. It can't be done post tense like what they're doing with Roe v. Wade right now.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be a previous law that sets into place a precedent. This is the reason why I believe Texas went the route it did, because they know that legally, constitutionally, they can't say that we have, as the government, a right to know what you're doing medically. They don't have that right. But
well, that's exactly
your
it.
neighbor does.
And that's, you're making a great point, Craig. I mean, this redraws political lines in the country when you talk about this particular issue. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not pro-life versus pro-choice. It's a completely redefined battleground when you talk about, is there a right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution and where should that debate occur? But Craig, all great points. We appreciate you calling in.
Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day.
You too. So if you have thoughts like Craig on the right to privacy or any other legal question, 877-943-9673. Local Central Florida attorney Patrick Smith, 877-943-9673. You can give us a call now. And I did promise the office number. So before I go to Ron in Lakewood Ranch, I want to give out the office number. The number to call us at the office during the week if you have a question or want to schedule your complimentary consultation or book us to come and speak to one of your clubs or groups, 877-754-6764. Again, that's for any of our office locations. For those of you down in Sun City Center and those of you listening now on 96.3 Sun Radio, your community radio, you guys can come and see us in the Sun City Center office there in the Piant Wealth Management Building, 877-754-6764. That's also to schedule for any of our other offices in Clearwater or up in Claremont or the Villages, 877-754-6764. Give us a call now, live and local. Happy to help any way we can, answering your legal questions or listening to your opinion on the existence or non-existence of the right to privacy under the United States Constitution. 877-943-9673. All right, let's go to Ron in Lakewood Ranch. Ron, thank you for your patience and welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Yes, Patrick. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is really more of I'd like to hear your comment on it. And here's what I'd like to say, because it has to do with abortion, but it also has to do with privacy. Anyway, if you or I were driving down the street in our car and we ran into and somehow managed to kill a pregnant lady, she died and the baby died, you or I most likely would be charged with a double problem here. We killed two people, even though the child's not born yet. If a woman has an abortion, nothing happens. I don't quite understand the logic between those two terms. And I'm not arguing one way or another. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
And this has been muddied for the last 600 years. Okay. And so going back, I mean, if you read the actual draft opinion, it's not quite 600 years. I was being a little hyperbolic there.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they go back to the common laws written by Blackstone, and they go back to criminal statutes from England in the 1600s that talk about the whether or not, and again, for those of you with little ones listening, the subject matter of this show may get a little too adult for them. So this is your sort of courtesy reminder. You may want to turn the channel here in the next few seconds before we get into the rest of the comment on Ron's question. But there's an actual discussion in the common law about the quickening of the child or the pre-quickening of the child, and that distinction. And, you know, some of the pro-choice advocates in the actual case lean on that to say, well, there's a difference there as far as whether or not the abortion is permitted, pre-quickening versus quickening. But the common law says that the difference there only has an effect on not if it's a crime, but on the severity of the punishment of the offender. So I think that's kind of your point, is is it's not a question of is there a crime? At least I'm not trying to put words in Ron's mouth, but I think that's what Ron's saying. It's a question of, did you know you were hurting two people, or did you know you were hurting just one person? Or did you not know you were hurting anyone at all? Was it like a manslaughter deal? It was a complete accident. God forbid something should happen. So I don't think the old law, I don't think it would say that this is a determiner if it's criminal or not, but it would be a severity of the crime done.
Right. Yeah, and I recognize that the abortion issue is a problem for a long, long time, and it gets into your religious beliefs as to when the child is conceived, and it's a mess to try and figure it out. But it just, like I said, if we're going to have laws on the books, my only comment is they should be consistent.
So, Ron, let me ask you this question. It sounds to me like you do think there is a right to privacy under the Constitution. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. Where do you think that debate should occur? Should that occur with 9 justices at the Supreme Court, or should it be the state legislatures?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think probably, in my opinion, first it should go with each state, and then based on, you got 50 states, based on what their consensus is, or if there is a consensus, which there probably wouldn't be, then you throw it to the Supreme Court and you present maybe 3 or 4 different scenarios and let them try and figure out from a legal law standpoint what could work.
Well, I know it's difficult. You're describing women's suffrage. I mean, this is almost identical to what happened there. States passed laws on whether or not women had the right to vote. And then essentially what happened was you had a situation where some states got it right, some states got it wrong, and the Supreme Court corrected it. And at the end of the day, that's the path. But how hotly debated today is women's rights to vote?
Non-existent.
Right. It's a settled issue. And I think that's the current court's opinion, is that if you allow something like this to go through the political process, as painful and as painstaking and as lengthy as it may be, at least when it's settled through a political process, it's a settled topic. Did Roe versus Wade settle the abortion debate in this country? No, it made it worse. And I think that's the point. And it didn't make it worse because they got the decision wrong. It made it worse because it pulled it away from the political process. Had it been allowed to go through the political process, I believe ultimately the right goal, whatever would have been achieved, and it would have been accepted by the nation because of that political process. At least that's my opinion. I think it would have been a more settled point of law and not as volatile as it is today. But Ron, that's a great point. We appreciate you calling in.
Well, thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Yep. All right. You're listening to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith, 877-943-9673. You can call in now. We're live and local. And we are here taking your legal questions on any and all topics and your comments on whether or not there is a right to privacy in the United States Constitution. And we are discussing the leaked opinion that, again, is not yet law, but is an interesting read as far as the framework for this discussion and the decision before the 9 Supreme Court justices of our United States of America. 877-943-9673, 877-943-9673, or email me, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. All right, let's go to Sarasota. Let's talk to John. John, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, John.
Let me take you off a speakerphone. Hi. Not an attorney, but I remember reading a lot of legal stuff a long time ago. I'm about 60 now.
All right.
My understanding and remembering in college is that we don't actually, and I'm all for, by the way, I'm all for having privacy, but that we don't actually have privacy in the Constitution of the Bill of Rights, but it's implied. I think it was like with the 4th, the 5th, 7th, and the 9th, that it's just implied. That's kind of what I remember. But I do support that we should have one, but it's implied and it's been referenced in multiple cases, and that's that point. I had a question though for you, sir, because I love the topic.
All right.
And that is not so much looking at the issues of abortion, which seems to be the privacy issues today, but moving forward, and that would be in terms of commerce. As we see already what's happening in China, they're we'll reference to Bitcoin.
I think I know where you're going
right now in China.
Great question, John. Go
You
ahead.
you can't purchase anything in China now with paper currency. They have shifted to 100% digital. You can't buy an Apple, you can't buy anything, which is then monitored by the government. There's 3 currencies there that are digital currencies that they use. So my thought is, where does privacy go in the United States when that happens? Even today, if you don't have certain features enabled on your computer, you can't hit certain websites. That's not a government thing. That's business. That's commerce that's controlling it.
Well, I think
where do we go when everybody says you have to use digital for every transaction? That's kind of my basic question. There's your privacy.
Yeah, I think you're looking at trends there. It sounds like, John. And the trend in the nation, at least in regard to cryptocurrencies, is for privacy. I mean, that's one of the attractive selling points of cryptocurrency is the fact that it's so private and untraceable. It also has its drawbacks, obviously. But if you're looking at the temperature of the country and you're using the thermometer known as cryptocurrency, you would say, yes, this country is getting more private.
No.
You don't think
Yeah.
so?
Well, no. Okay, I do have cryptocurrency. I buy it, I trade it, I mine it, etc. But I don't want cryptocurrency the way that it's being handled in China. I do not want a digital currency where every transaction I have is being traced.
Right.
I guess that's my thought or my concern. The United States government is reanalyzing digital currency, and they want one that they control, kind of like China. So you'll 100% lose your right to privacy if the government can track every transaction that you make.
I think that's a fantastic point. That it potentially, I'm not saying it definitively is, but it potentially could be a bait and switch. You think you're doing something that's leading to more privacy, and then all of a sudden it gets turned on its head, and it's a complete sacrifice of all things private. So, great point, John. Great point, and I appreciate you calling in.
Okay.
All right. So let me ask you one follow-up question, John. So put on your black robe.
Yeah.
And you're now on the Supreme Court for at least this hypothetical, okay? Right to privacy in the Constitution, yes or no?
We should have a right to privacy, yes.
The debate over whether or not abortion should be legal or illegal, is it a question for the Supreme Court of the United States or the state legislature?
I believe that's for the state legislature.
Okay. John, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
all righty. You're listening to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith. 877-943-9673. 877-943-9673. Give us a call now, live, local, happy to help. Give us a call with your legal question or your comment on the right to privacy and existing or not existing in the United States Constitution. 877-943-9673. Email me, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. All right, let's go to beautiful Milwaukee and talk to Jason. Jason, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you so much for having your show. I've listened to Ask an Attorney for several years, and I'm glad that you picked up the torch and have helped carry on helping people learn about the Florida law. So,
well, I greatly appreciate you saying that, Jason. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Milwaukee is the Algonquin word for the good land.
yeah, well, I was originally born in Florida, so I'm just up here by circumstances.
All right. Well, how can we help you, Jason?
Yes, my question to you is for my father, who's down in Naples, Florida. I've been trying to get them to call and deal with you about estate planning. And my mom just recently passed away. And
I'm sorry about your mom, Jason.
Thank you. My dad's trying to learn some things about estate planning so that way when things happen for him, that there's just not this big onslaught of battle with all the siblings.
Yeah.
So he lives in Naples, Florida. And he's listening now. Is there a chance you can explain living with or trust planning? And then because he lives in Naples, I think your office is in Lakeland. You have other ones, but I don't know the locations. But if you could announce those as well and a phone number that he could contact.
Sure.
So that he could possibly meet up with you folks to have that estate planning.
Well, Jason, before I hang up with you and answer your question for your father, right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution or not?
I believe we should have a right to privacy.
All right. I appreciate that feedback, Jason. I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to let you go, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All righty, so the short answer to the question that Jason had is differences between wills and trust. Trust often bypass the probate process entirely. They carry a right to privacy, and they also provide something called incapacity planning that allows you to plan for the period when you're not able to handle your own affairs, but you're not yet deceased. So for all those reasons, trusts tend to be extremely popular. We do have an office there in Fort Myers, by the way, so which is somewhat near Naples. So there in Fort Myers, we'll be happy to meet with you. And that number for your complimentary estate planning consultation, 877-754-6764, 877-754-6764. All righty, I have some very patient callers who have been waiting. Let's go to, are we going to Ann next? All right, we're going to Ann in South Tampa. Ann, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show.
Oh, hi, and thank you, and welcome to Tampa.
I appreciate that. Ann,
really enjoying your show.
I've got about 3.5 minutes here, so I have a little bit of time.
Okay, the problem is I have, some of these states are saying you don't have a right for the life of the mother or incest.
Mm-hmm.
And my best friend has 3 children. She almost died with a third one. And she spent that months with 2 other young children. And the problem is if her, and also she has female problems. So if she's late 1 week, she likes to go to the doctor and find out what's wrong.
Wow.
And if this law passes, if she should go to the doctor and he says, oh, you're pregnant, and vasectomies can mess up. There are all kinds of things that can happen. Birth control can mess up. I mean, I thought that was what the other caller was about. You're sentencing her to almost death or, major problems in her family.
Well, and I think that's the point, is the situation here is the potential ruling in this draft opinion doesn't decide the outcome of abortion. It just sends it back to the states to be debated. And I think that it's in almost every state, my understanding is there's an allowance for mother's safety or for incest.
No, sir, there's not. There's not. They're passing laws where it's not incest or. And the thing is you can't even go get a test done to see if you're pregnant through your doctor, or to find out what's wrong with you, because you will risk the doctor's. License.
Well,
if you should find out you're pregnant and have to go get an abortion.
And I will say a special prayer for your friend, and I appreciate you calling in. I got a couple other callers I want to get to before the end of the show.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. 877-943-9673. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith. Let's go to a very patient Joanne in Sarasota. Joanne, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I have about a minute-ish.
Very quickly, I believe that everything that the Constitution does is implied to the privacy of the citizen. But over to abortion, yes, I believe it's states' rights. But it's a red herring in my mind, because first of all, a woman can take the morning after pill. And if there is no life to a fetus, then why are they harvesting organs? It's because there is life.
Well,
and it's compatible.
And I really appreciate you and all the other women who had the bravery to call in today. It takes a lot of courage. So since you're going to be my last caller and last female caller of the day, it sounds to me like you think there is a right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution.
Oh, absolutely. Why did they bother with it if that wasn't the genesis of creating the Constitution?
And this debate, it sounds like in your mind, should happen at the state legislature as opposed to 9 Supreme Court justices. Is that correct?
And any doctor is going to protect a woman whose life is at stake.
Okay.
There is no question about that.
Well, Joanne, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate your bravery. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All righty. Well, there it is. Our show on the leaked Supreme Court opinion regarding the constitutionality of the right to privacy under Roe v. Wade. And we may have to do a follow-up show on this. I feel like we just scratched the tip of the iceberg, and I feel like a lot of people have other comments and thoughts. But the interesting cross section there. A lot of people saying, yes, there is, but it should be decided by the states. There is a constitutional right to privacy, but it's a state's issue. So there you go, folks. That's empirical evidence. This is the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. We'll be back with you next week. The good Lord willing, 877-943-9673, or give us a call at the office, 877-754-6764. God bless, go Gators, and happy Mother's Day.
The preceding was sponsored by the law offices of Patrick L. Smith. W282CI Tampa, W271CY Lakeland, W262CP